welcome to The Writer's Dream. This is a show where authors can talk about how they write their books, how they publish their books, and how they market their books. We are on YouTube and we are on Facebook. If you wish to be on The Writer's Dream or you have a question for us, please address that question or request to the Facebook page and we will be happy to accommodate you. Today's guests are Nicholas and Beryl Skula. And Nicholas has written a book and Beryl has collaborated on a book about a journey they took with their daughter. The name of the book is He Rejoices Over Me. Nicholas and Beryl have given talks in bereavement groups and in churches about their journey with their daughter. They also participated in producing or were part of an award-winning gospel album called Change the Atmosphere. So welcome. Tell us about your daughter, Crystal Marie.
Well, Crystal Marie was a very unique person. She had lived an extraordinary life. She had multiple friends with a desire. She lived for her friends, and she just lived for life. She had accomplished many things. She was a ballerina. She was a runner, dancer, singer. Anything that interested her, she had to be involved in.
So she sounds like a really wonderful, typical American girl.
Yes, she was. She also was musically inclined. She played the piano and clarinet, as well as her singing I mentioned earlier. And she loved music also.
So tell me about your journey with her.
Well, it all started when she was very young. When she was a couple of years old, we noticed that she was having trouble communicating. And during this time, she had trouble, she could hear what you were saying. She knew how to think, but she developed what's called a speech impediment. Mm-hmm. And what it was is she eventually overcame this through therapy. And what it was is I believe that profoundly changed her personality. Now when she spoke, she was very deliberate. She chose her words very carefully. And it just made her very determined in everything she sought out to accomplish.
I guess maybe when you like us, we take for granted our ability to speak and communicate. And when you can't take it for granted and you really have to concentrate on it, I guess you appreciate it a little bit more.
Well, one unique thing about her is people don't really understand that she was very slow to speak. She chose her words very carefully. And people thought that maybe she was unfriendly, but what it was is she really would only speak when she thought things through. And as a child, that's very profound. A lot of times as an adult, we have to train ourselves to think before we would make a statement or speak. But she had learned that lesson on, and it made her, she was very interesting because people always wanted to know what she was thinking.
So tell me about, I did read some of the chapters, and I read about some of her relationships with her friends. Tell me about some of those stories, because some of them are very interesting and nice.
Yeah, well, Crystal was the type of person that everybody was so important. When she had a friend, you had to correctly pronounce that friend's name or she would be upset. She was very beautiful and very popular, but yet she would befriend anybody that needed a friend. She had no barriers. She was not part of a clique, and she just loved everybody and tried to be involved and help anybody through everything. She had this unique character. When we had her, we took her to the martial arts to get training, and she really excelled in that. But there was a strange thing about her. If someone would pick on her, because she had experienced some bullying, she wouldn't defend herself. But if you picked on her friend, she would actually go after that person because her friends were so important to her.
Yes.
And had such a high value in her life.
So did she get her musical talents from Beryl and you, Nick?
Well, I'd have to say, I have to give my wife Beryl credit. She's the singer in the family. In our church, I'm just called a worshiper. She's got the beautiful voice, and
thank you, sir.
I'm the fellow in the back that's noisy, keeping things going.
And I did play the organ when I was in my teens.
So there's musical talent in the family. So
Yes.
she was.
Well, I played an accordion, but I didn't do too good. That was popular in the
Well,
60s.
that's pretty difficult, I must say. So then, how old was she when she was diagnosed with cancer?
The first time she was diagnosed, she was 11 years old. She just was a part of a marathon, a 10-mile marathon, 3 weeks before. And she just had a way of pushing herself beyond, her will was stronger than her body. And then all of a sudden, we noticed a change. Her grades dropped dramatically, and it wasn't like her, because she was an honor roll student.
Good student.
Yeah, yes.
And then, you know, we seen like physically she was getting fatigued. And then, you know, one day the nurse called my
On a
wife.
Friday afternoon, said she had a headache, and I came and got her and picked her up and brought her to the pediatrician. And he said, "Oh, give her some Tylenol," and sent us home. And then about 7:30 that night, she was in agonizing pain. And I called up the covering physician, and he said, "I don't like the sound of this. Take her to the nearest hospital." And that was good, Sam, and have her scanned, which we did. And that's when they gave us the news, and they said that they could not handle that there was a brain tumor there. And so we immediately had a choice of hospitals. We chose Children's, then known as Snyder's Children's Hospital, since called Cohen's. And we had to, our son at the time was home, and he was 16 years old, he's still home. And we had to, so I said, well, let me just go home and shower and pick up Nick. And they told us we had an hour and a half, and I no more got home and received a phone call that the ambulance would be there, and they were on their way into the hospital. So I had to call our son down, and I said, you know, what he knew.
Schneider is where? Long Island Jewish?
Yes.
Children's Hospital.
And our son and I, it was all God just got us to the hospital. We pulled up right behind the ambulance. I really had no idea where it was at the time. And she was immediately up with a team of doctors and staff. And we thought perhaps that we could get, my husband suggested he wanted to go for a second opinion, and we were told by the head neurosurgeon that there was no time to go for a second opinion. It had to be. So they operated her on her. That was a Friday, and this was on that Sunday morning she was operated on. And we, of course, have to tell you that she could
It
have
was a brain tumor?
brain tumor, yes. It looked like
What's the name of it?
glioblastoma multiforme, number 4. It's we didn't know at the time, but it's always fatal. And
It's the one with all the little...
yeah, the tentacles. It was down into her brain.
I have to tell you about the story of faith. Most people that come down with that tumor have a life expectancy of 3 months, we were told. In our church, we were at the Smithtown Gospel Tabernacle Church. The head pastor had the whole congregation stop the service, and he had the whole congregation. He told them the story that one of our kids is in serious trouble. She's undergoing burn surgery right now. And he stopped the service and had everybody pray for her. And when we were rolling her in, you know, she noticed my wife was upset. And she said, "What's the matter, Mom?" Mother says, "I'm concerned, this is serious." And she goes, "Don't worry, Mom. The worst that could happen to me is I'll be with Jesus sooner than later." Well, as soon as those doors closed, we broke down. I admit I couldn't.
Oh, sure.
But
Oh, sure.
praise God, He extended her life 3 years after that with
Wow.
no neurological,
Deficits.
very, very minor, but a week
Amazing.
later, this picture was taken a week later after her brain surgery, and she did a recital. And she lived a full life, and she was never afraid of dying. What she was afraid of is not living, and life meant so much to her.
That's a very, very good message. Not afraid of dying, but afraid of not living. Yeah, that's a great message, and amazing for a kid that young. So this was at 11, and she had 3 more years.
Yeah,
and
just
usually when they take a tumor out like that, there's brain damage.
That's what they said.
Yes.
They said speech deficit. She didn't have that. Then they said, oh, it's on the right
Memory?
side of her brain. Will affect her left side.
They
And
thought she was going to, they tell you everything. They thought she was going to be paralyzed. And the first thing she did when she opened her eyes, she seen her mom. And she's supposed to be paralyzed on the left side. So when she lifted up her hand to touch her mom, we were very thankful.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So did she have to go through chemo or radiation?
Yes, it was intensive after following the operation, 6 weeks of chemo and radiation. That was difficult.
That
every day.
paid a toll on her.
Lost a lot of weight.
After the operation, it was like a mosquito bite. It was like she was up, she was talking, she wanted to do things, and then the treatment was worse than the disease, you would say.
Yeah, well, most people will tell you that. I mean, yeah. I'm a cancer survivor too, but I was so fortunate not to have to go through chemo.
Yes.
I wasn't so much worried about the radiation, but chemo was something that, I have a great fear of. And I've had friends who've gone through it, and it's just, it's devastating to the body. And one hopes that the current research, which targets the cancer cells more specifically,
Yes, we've learned that.
come on the market soon, because cancer is, cancer many times today, unfortunately with your daughter it wasn't, is not a death sentence. People 30 years ago were afraid to even go to the doctor to get that diagnosis because they knew what it meant. But
This particular cancer that she had, this glioblastoma multiforme, they've made no progress. This is one of the most difficult cancers that it's affected a lot of famous people too. And she was clean for like almost 3 years. And when it came back, it was like overnight. We were shocked.
That's what the hemo-onc doctor said, that hemoncology, it's like tsunami, and it comes in and then took her quickly. She had a second brain tumor, and at that point, they removed it, but within 2 weeks, it returned.
yeah,
So
I have a friend whose son went the same way. That when the brain tumor returned, it grew back almost like, as you said, overnight. A very horrible,
Oh, I'm so
horrible
sorry.
thing to happen. So then you had to go through the journey of grieving. And,
Yes.
And I know that because you give talks at grieving groups, you probably have some very important things to say to people who have to go through this terrible thing.
Well, there's been a couple things to help me. Writing this book,
Yeah.
we had to relive a lot of memories, our life. And one thing that people blessed us with is a lot of people gave us stories that were unknown to us. See, one thing about my daughter, she was very private, and a lot of times she would be involved in these events, and she wouldn't tell us. And toward the end of, after she left for heaven, people came and told us these amazing stories, and we had no idea, and we were very pleased to hear them. But we were just thankful for the people, the prayers, support, and I must say that if there's someone out there that a family's going through this, it affects the whole family,
Oh, of course it
brothers,
does.
sisters. It affects you emotionally, mentally, sometimes spiritually, and financially too. It really can devastate people.
And I've also heard or learned or read that many times the death of a child affects the marriage. Many couples divorce after the death of a child because they cannot reconcile the different grieving processes that they are both going through, and they end up angry at each other
Well, what
or
happened?
lost.
What happened? My husband was trying to be the strong man, and I was grieving. But I knew after I had prayed about it, I'm like, Lord. And then finally, after about a year, I said, Lord, he needs help. And then shortly thereafter, he fell asleep, and he had that dream. So I felt like the dream was an answer to prayer, and with that, he felt that he was taken to heaven, and he saw our daughter, and she was doing well, and that brought him such peace.
Well, people often ask me, they know I'm a man of faith and believe in God and Jesus Christ. They say, why don't you just walk away from God? They say, what? And I tell them, where would I go? He's all I know.
Well, not only that, I think it's very convenient to blame things on God.
Yes.
And, God gives us life, and he gives us a life and free will
Yes,
and
very
an
important.
intellect, and to do with it as we as we please, and
Yes.
but then when things go wrong, we blame him.
Well, you know something, I don't regret one day, God gives us these children as a gift.
Such a blessing.
And every day, and then I have a promise of eternity. And I was good. What happened with our daughter is that my wife shared that I was suffering depression, and it was really getting bad because I was trying to hide this from everybody. And you know, being the father of the family, you want to be strong for everybody around you. But one night, I was grieving, and I dreamed that I passed away. I dreamed I went to bed, I felt myself spinning, and I had woken up by this bright light. And I was no longer in my bed, and I was in heaven. And I remember the sky being so bright and so many people excited. And then all of a sudden my wife appeared. And before my daughter left, she just was picked to play Claire in the Nutcracker. And we were really excited. They were going to have these ballerinas from Germany come over and train her. And like all those dreams just seemed to die. And what happened was during this dream, I got a hold of my wife, and there's my daughter. And she sees us, and she comes running over. And she grabs my wife's hand first, because we were holding hands, and she starts pulling us through this crowd. And being a father, I said, wait a minute, I want to get a hug out of you. And I tried to stop, but I had no power. But as she's leading us into this other room, it was an empty room, but the atmosphere was different. It was somber. And she brings us to this altar. And in this altar, I couldn't see their faces, but I seen three visions. It appeared to be the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. And then she stepped away. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. And I was watching her. And all of a sudden I realized my daughter is dressed as a ballerina. I says, why is she dressed this way? No one's dressed like this here. And I couldn't speak that. But I noticed that she had certain characteristics. I noticed her biting her bottom lip, which usually she's nervous, and she does that just before something. And I noticed when toe raises. And all of a sudden this song comes on, He Rejoices Over Me. It's one of the songs we did later in the choir about, it's a song we sing about God saw me in my desperation. I sought relief, none could be found. So the Father sought me. He lifted me up. Now he celebrates my salvation. Well, once the song came on, and I recognized the song, my daughter was half me and half my wife growing up. She had both our personalities. Very aggressively, she runs to the altar, and everybody in the room is shocked. And she jumps in this high pirouette, and all of a sudden she spins, and everybody realizes she overdone it. She's going to fall. And she landed perfectly before God, and she starts dancing. And other ballerinas started joining in, and all of a sudden I got my voice, and I got my wits about me, and I'm telling her, that's my daughter, that's my daughter. And as the performance is over, I go running to her, and just as I'm about to touch her, I blink my eyes, and I'm back in my bed.
Aww.
And I sometimes God will give you these things. God said that when he left Jesus, that he would not leave us comfortless. And I believe ministers have told me that God has taken my spirit to the third heaven to see this, to hold me.
Yeah, well, one of the best books that I have read on losing things was a book that I think it goes back to probably the 80s. It's called Necessary Losses.
Okay.
And basically what it says, the premise of the book is that you're born, and from the day you're born, you're losing things. And that, and it's more gentle than that. That's a pretty harsh way of putting it. But you are losing things as you're getting older from the
Sure.
minute you're born.
Yes.
And